Let me tell you about Katamon, a neighborhood that in many ways represents the heart of modern Jerusalem's transformation and the complex layers of history that define this extraordinary city. Katamon sits in southern Jerusalem, adjacent to both the German colony and Baka, and if you want to understand the story of Jerusalem itself, the story of how ancient meets modern, how tragic history becomes hopeful future, how diverse communities learn to coexist, then Katamon is the neighborhood you need to know. The name Katamon comes from the Greek katamonas, meaning by the monastery, referring to the Greek Orthodox monastery of Saint Simeon that once dominated this area. But Katamon's story really begins in the early 20th century, during the final years of Ottoman rule and the beginning of the British Mandate period. In the 1920s and 30s, Katamon developed as one of Jerusalem's most affluent Arab neighborhoods, home to wealthy Palestinian Christian and Muslim families who built beautiful stone villas with expansive gardens, ornate details, and all the grandeur that wealth could provide in Mandate Palestine. These weren't modest homes. These were mansions, estates really, built by prominent families with names that once carried weight in Jerusalem society: physicians, lawyers, merchants, landowners who represented the Palestinian Arab elite. The neighborhood that developed was sophisticated and cosmopolitan. Katamon had clubs, cinemas, shops, and a social scene that rivaled anything in Jerusalem. The architecture reflected wealth and taste, with houses featuring arched windows, stone courtyards, elaborate tilework, and gardens that were the envy of the city. It was a neighborhood where you might hear Arabic, English, French, and Greek spoken on the streets, where the wealthy sent their children to the best schools, and where social gatherings brought together the cream of Palestinian society. Walking through certain streets of Katamon today, you can still see these grand old Arab villas, many now subdivided into apartments or converted to other uses, but still bearing witness to that elegant past. Then came 1948, and everything changed. During Israel's War of Independence, Katamon became a battlefield. The neighborhood's strategic location, situated between the Jewish neighborhoods to the north and the Arab areas to the south, made it a crucial prize. The fighting was intense and bitter. In April 1948, Jewish forces captured Katamon in a battle that involved house-to-house combat and significant casualties on both sides. The wealthy Arab families who had built this neighborhood fled or were forced to leave, abandoning their beautiful villas, their possessions, their entire lives. In a matter of days, Katamon was emptied of its original inhabitants, becoming part of the larger tragedy of 1948 that Palestinians call the Nakba, the catastrophe, and that Israelis remember as their war of independence. What happened next shaped modern Katamon. The abandoned Arab villas and properties were taken over by the Israeli government and allocated to new Jewish immigrants flooding into the nascent state. But these weren't wealthy immigrants. These were refugees themselves, Jews fleeing persecution and violence in Arab countries, Holocaust survivors from Europe, desperately poor families who had lost everything and arrived in Israel with nothing but the clothes on their backs and hopes for a new life. They were placed in buildings that had once housed Jerusalem's Arab elite, often multiple families crammed into villas designed for single wealthy households. The grand drawing rooms became communal kitchens, the elegant bedrooms were subdivided with hanging sheets, and the beautiful gardens fell into neglect as families struggled simply to survive. For decades, from the 1950s through the 70s, Katamon was known as a poor, struggling neighborhood, populated primarily by Mizrahi Jews, immigrants from Iraq, Yemen, Morocco, and other Middle Eastern and North African countries who faced discrimination and economic hardship in Israeli society. The beautiful architecture remained, but the neighborhood was rough around the edges, working class, far from fashionable. The old Arab villas crumbled slowly, divided among multiple families who lacked the resources to maintain them properly. Katamon was not where ambitious young Israelis aspired to live. It was where poor immigrants were placed and where they made do as best they could. But starting in the 1980s and accelerating dramatically through the 90s and 2000s, Katamon began to transform yet again. This transformation happened for several reasons. First, young Israeli professionals and academics began to recognize the neighborhood's potential. The beautiful old architecture, the solid stone construction, the large properties, the proximity to the city center, and crucially, the relatively affordable prices compared to established neighborhoods like Rehavia or the German colony. Second, a wave of English-speaking immigrants, particularly from North America, discovered Katamon as a more affordable alternative to the already gentrifying German colony and Baca. Third, the modern Orthodox and religious Zionist community, growing in numbers and affluence, found in Katamon the space and character they were seeking. The gentrification of Katamon has been one of the most dramatic neighborhood transformations in Israeli history. Those crumbling Arab villas that had housed multiple poor immigrant families were purchased, evicted, gutted, and renovated into stunning single-family homes or divided into luxury apartments. Property values skyrocketed, new construction filled empty lots, and gradually, painfully, the original Mizrahi immigrant population was pushed out, replaced by a wealthier, more educated, more Ashkenazi demographic. This gentrification is controversial and ongoing, with tensions between longtime residents fighting to stay and newcomers willing to pay astronomical prices to live in this increasingly desirable neighborhood. Today's Katamon is a fascinating patchwork, a neighborhood in transition that hasn't fully completed its transformation. In some areas, particularly Upper Katamon near Gaza Street, the gentrification is nearly complete, with beautifully renovated homes, upscale shops and cafes, and a population that skews professional, educated, and affluent. In other areas, particularly Lower Katamon and the San Simon neighborhood within Katamon's boundaries, you still find pockets of the old working-class character, elderly Mizrahi residents who've lived here for 60 or 70 years, rent-controlled apartments in buildings that desperately need renovation, and a grittiness that stands in stark contrast to the polished gentrification happening streets away. The current population of Katamon is somewhere around 15 to 20,000 residents, though exact numbers are difficult because the neighborhood's boundaries are somewhat fluid and disputed. Religiously, Katamon is diverse, but with a strong modern Orthodox and religious Zionist presence, perhaps 50 to 60% of the population, with secular and traditional Jews making up much of the remainder. There's a minimal ultra-Orthodox presence and virtually no non-Jewish population, a stark change from the neighborhood's origins. The Anglo-immigrant population is significant but smaller than in Baca or the German colony, perhaps 15 to 25%, concentrated in certain sub-areas. What makes Katamon particularly interesting is its physical layout and the way different sections have distinct characters. The neighborhood is generally divided into several areas, each with its own personality. Upper Katamon, closest to Gaza Street and the city center, is the most gentrified and expensive, with beautifully renovated villas, tree-lined streets, proximity to Emek Rephaim in the German colony, and prices that rival or exceed those in the German colony itself. The Katamon Gimel area, sometimes called Old Katamon, has some of the most spectacular Arab villas, many now carefully renovated, along with the main commercial center, including the Katamon Supersol and various shops and services. The San Simon neighborhood, technically part of Katamon, has maintained more of the working-class character, with apartment buildings from the 50s and 60s, a more Mizrahi demographic, and more affordable prices, though even here gentrification is creeping in. And then there's the area around the massive Katamon synagogue complex, which has become a major religious and community center drawing people from across southern Jerusalem. The real estate market in Katamon reflects this complex layering. In the most desirable areas, particularly Upper Katamon with its renovated Arab villas, prices can be astronomical. A beautifully renovated villa might sell for 12 to 20 million shekels or more, $3 to $6 million. A nice three-bedroom apartment in a good location might cost 5 to 8 million shekels, $1.4 to $2.3 million. But in less gentrified areas, you can still find older apartments needing renovation for significantly less, perhaps 3 to 4 million shekels for a 3-bedroom, making Katamon one of the last neighborhoods in central Jerusalem where you might find something approaching affordability, though that term is increasingly relative. Rentals in Katamon vary enormously depending on location and condition. A renovated 3-bedroom apartment might rent for 9 to 13,000 shekels per month, $2,500 to $3,700, while an older, unrenovated apartment in a less desirable area might rent for 6 to 8,000 shekels. This price variation creates a neighborhood with real economic diversity, increasingly rare in gentrified Jerusalem. Education is one of Katamon's great strengths, particularly for religious families. The neighborhood is home to numerous excellent schools serving the modern Orthodox and religious Zionist communities. For girls, there's Pelek, one of Jerusalem's premier modern Orthodox schools that actually straddles the border between Katamon and Baka, offering grades 1 through 12 with very high academic standards and a significant Anglo population. There's also Ephrata and other religious girls' schools. For boys, Himmelfarb Elementary and Junior High School in Katamon proper is considered top tier, with strong academics and a balance of religious and secular studies. These schools draw families from across Jerusalem, making Katamon a destination for religious families prioritizing education. For secular families, the options are more limited within Katamon itself, and many send children to schools in nearby neighborhoods like the German colony or Rechavia. Preschool options are abundant, with numerous Ganim serving both secular and religious families, including several with English-speaking programs catering to Anglo immigrants. The religious infrastructure in Katamon is exceptional, perhaps the neighborhood's greatest draw for observant families. The massive Katamon synagogue complex, known as Beit Knesset Katamon, is a sprawling facility that's unlike anything else in Jerusalem. This isn't just one synagogue, but rather a complex housing multiple minyanim representing different styles and times, a large community center, educational facilities, and social services all under one roof. On Shabbat morning, you can choose from early minyanim, late minyanim, Karlebach-style minyanim, traditional Nusach Ashkenaz, Nusach Sephard, young professionals minyanim, and more. This diversity under one roof means that almost any religious preference can be accommodated, making the Katamon synagogue a draw for Jews from across southern Jerusalem. Beyond the main complex, Katamon is home to dozens of other synagogues serving various communities. There are Sephardi synagogues serving the Mizrahi old-timers and newer Sephardi families, Ashkenazi shoals serving different styles and communities, Chabad houses, and numerous small shtiblock in apartment buildings and storefronts. The density of synagogues means you're never more than a few minutes' walk from multiple prayer options, and the variety means you can almost certainly find a community that fits your religious style and social preferences. Torah learning opportunities abound in Katamon. There are daily shurim in Talmud, Halasha, Tanakh, and Jewish philosophy. Daf Yomi groups meet in multiple locations. Women's learning groups study everything from Parsha to advanced Talmud. There are Shavruto for men at various levels. The neighborhood has become a center for serious Torah study, attracting scholars, rabbis, and lay people committed to ongoing Jewish learning. The commercial scene in Katamon is practical rather than glamorous, more neighborhood-focused than destination dining. The main commercial area centers around the Supersol supermarket and adjacent shops, providing all the daily necessities, but lacking the cafe culture and restaurant scene of nearby Emek Rephaim. There are a few good restaurants, several pizza shops, falafel stands, and basic services, but if you want the upscale dining and sophisticated cafe culture, you walk 10 minutes to the German colony. This practical, rather than flashy commercial infrastructure actually appeals to many families who prefer a real neighborhood feel over tourist-oriented glitz. Shopping for daily needs is straightforward, with the large Supersol providing comprehensive groceries, several smaller supermarkets offering competition, Numerous small specialty shops selling everything from fish to baked goods to kosher wines, and a hardware store, pharmacies, and other practical services. On Wednesdays and Fridays, the Baka Shuk is just a short walk away, offering fresh produce, cheese, fish, and prepared foods in a bustling market atmosphere. Transportation in Katamon is generally good. Multiple bus lines run through the neighborhood connecting to the city center, other Jerusalem neighborhoods, and major destinations. The light rail is accessible with a 10 to 15-minute walk to either the first station stop or stations on Hebron Road, depending on which part of Katamon you're in. For those commuting to Tel Aviv, the Malcha train station is about a 15 to 20-minute drive, making the journey feasible, though long. Many Katamon residents work in Jerusalem itself, taking advantage of the neighborhood's central location and good public transportation to reach offices, hospitals, schools, and other workplaces across the city. Parking in Katamon is less nightmarish than in the German colony, but still challenging in the more densely built areas. Many of the old Arab villas have gardens that have been partially converted to parking, and some newer buildings include parking, but street parking requires resident permits and patience. The situation is better than on Emek Rephaim, but worse than in suburban neighborhoods, a middle ground that reflects Katamon's transitional urban character. The social scene in Katamon reflects the neighborhood's diversity. For religious families, community life often centers around synagogue, with Shabbat meals, learning groups, holiday celebrations, and life cycle events creating dense social networks. The Anglo community, while smaller than in Baka, is active and welcoming, with English speakers finding each other through synagogues, schools, and informal networks. For secular and traditional families, social life is more individualized, centered on personal friendships, cafe culture in the nearby German colony, and activities throughout Jerusalem. Children's activities are abundant, with numerous after-school programs in sports, arts, music, and various enrichment activities. The religious youth movements like Bnei Akiva and Ezra are active and popular. Summer camps, both day camps and overnight camps, serve families with various options for different ages and religious levels. Parks and playgrounds dot the neighborhood, and the proximity to larger parks like the Sharover Promenade and Liberty Bell Park provides excellent recreational options. The atmosphere in Katamon varies dramatically depending on where you are and when. The more gentrified areas have a polished, professional feel with beautifully maintained homes, clean streets, and a population of successful professionals and their families. The less gentrified areas retain more of the old neighborhood character, with elderly residents sitting on stoops, Hebrew with Mizrahi accents heard in conversations, and a grittier, more authentically Jerusalem feel. On Shabbat, the neighborhood transforms, with streets quiet of traffic, families walking to and from synagogue, children playing freely, and a peaceful atmosphere quite different from the weekday hustle. One of Katamon's most fascinating features is the way history remains visible and tangible. Those Arab villas that once housed Palestinian elites now house Israeli Jewish families, many of them religiously observant, many of them immigrants from countries that no longer welcome Jews. The irony is not lost on anyone. Some residents are deeply conscious of this history and grapple with the moral complexity of living in homes from which others were displaced. Others prefer not to think about it, focusing on building their own lives and futures. The neighborhood itself seems suspended between past and present, with Arabic architectural details on buildings that now house mezuzahs on doorposts, with street names commemorating Zionist leaders in a neighborhood designed by Palestinian Arabs, with layers of history overlapping and sometimes conflicting. The challenges facing Katamon are real and ongoing. The gentrification that has brought new wealth and vitality has also displaced longtime residents who can no longer afford skyrocketing rents and property taxes. Elderly Mizrahi Jews who were placed here as refugees in the 1950s are being pushed out by young Ashkenazi professionals willing to pay millions for renovated villas. This creates real tensions and raises difficult questions about who has the right to the neighborhood, whose Jerusalem this is, and how to balance preservation of community with the natural evolution of urban neighborhoods. The preservation of the historic Arab architecture is another challenge. Some renovations have been sensitive and careful, maintaining the beautiful arched windows, ornate stonework, and architectural details that make these buildings special. Others have been more destructive, gutting buildings and destroying irreplaceable historical elements in favor of modern interiors. The Jerusalem municipality has preservation regulations, but enforcement is inconsistent, and the pressure to maximize living space often wins out over historical sensitivity. The religious character of the neighborhood is also evolving and contested. As more modern Orthodox families move in, some secular longtime residents feel increasingly uncomfortable, worried about religious coercion or social pressure to conform to Orthodox standards. There have been conflicts over Shabbat observance, noise from synagogues, and the general direction of the neighborhood. These tensions are usually managed through negotiation and compromise, but they reflect the broader struggles in Israeli society over religion, secularism, and coexistence. Yet despite these challenges and complexities, Katamon has emerged as one of Jerusalem's success stories, a neighborhood that has managed to reinvent itself while maintaining connections to its past, that offers quality of life at a somewhat lower price point than the most elite neighborhoods, and that provides a real sense of community alongside urban convenience. For religious families particularly, Katamon offers an unbeatable combination: excellent schools within walking distance, numerous synagogue options, a critical mass of observant families creating a supportive community, proximity to the cultural attractions of the German colony and city center, and prices that, while high, are still somewhat more accessible than in Baca or Upper German colony. For those walking through Katamon today, what you see is a neighborhood in motion, still transforming, still negotiating its identity. You'll pass a beautifully renovated Arab villa with a mezuzah on the door and children's bicycles in the garden, then turn the corner to find a crumbling apartment building from the 50s housing elderly immigrants who've lived there since arriving as refugees 70 years ago. You'll hear Hebrew spoken with American accents mixed with Hebrew flavored by Arabic and Amharic. You'll see young mothers pushing expensive strollers past old men playing backgammon outside corner stores. You'll find haute cuisine restaurants steps away from humble falafel stands. You'll encounter synagogues of every style and community centers bustling with activity. This is Katamon, a neighborhood that embodies Jerusalem itself. Layered, complex, sometimes contradictory, always fascinating. It's a place where history is not abstract but literally built into the stones of the houses, where displacement and renewal exist side by side, where diverse communities navigate coexistence with varying degrees of success, where past tragedies become present opportunities, and where thousands of families are building lives and futures without ever fully escaping the shadows of the past. For those considering Katamon, the question is whether you can embrace this complexity, whether you can live comfortably in a neighborhood that hasn't resolved its identity, that hasn't achieved the polished perfection of the German colony or the cohesive Anglo character of Baca, but that offers instead something rawer, more authentic, more real. Katamon isn't for those seeking easy answers or simple narratives. It's for those who can handle ambiguity, who can appreciate beauty alongside struggle, who can build a Jewish future while acknowledging a Palestinian past, and who value community and substance over style and polish. For such people, Katamon offers something precious, a chance to be part of Jerusalem's ongoing story, to participate in a neighborhood's transformation, and to create a life of meaning in one of the world's most meaningful cities.